Well, he felt really, really bad. You'd go to see him in the nursing home, and how you doing, Frank? And one half of his body was completely done, and he'd lift his arm up and it just dropped.
Frank Fritz didn't just keep old things. He hit a hallway with boxes that said "too painful" and a dollhouse filled with real teeth. His locked garage wasn't just full of bikes. It held secrets, maps, and stuff no one had ever seen. He wrote notes to people he never met, like he knew someone would find them one day. Let us expose what was sealed in wax and hidden for years. The locked garage. Frank Fritz had died weeks earlier. His stroke had come fast, his decline faster. Friends had gathered, family had flown in. But now the house was still, silent, until someone turned the key. That key scraped against the metal like a match on flint, breaking the hush that had settled like dust. But nothing could prepare them for what was waiting.
Those are just pretty much parts bikes, you know. Something without a title is a definite no-no. If you don't have a title, sometimes it creates just a big hassle. The item could be worth $200. It might cost you $500 to get a title for.
The estate team arrived with gloves, boxes, and a quiet sense of dread. They weren't here to grieve. They were here to clean, inventory, itemize. But when they slid the lock open and pulled the garage door up, what they found made them stop. Not because it was a mess, not because it was dangerous, but because it was intentional. Rows of motorcycles, not just bikes, relics, machines with leather seats older than some of the men lifting them, chrome parts catching dust like they were frozen in time. They stood in tight rows, handlebar to handlebar, as if they were waiting, guarding something. The first row held Harley-Davidsons, old ones, classic builds with rust patterns that looked almost painted on. Behind them, a shelf stacked with boxes, fire helmets, brass nozzles, buckets painted red and peeling, a piece of rope labeled with a tag that read Chicago 1922, and tucked beside the shelf, an iron fireman's bell with a crack running straight through the center, a silent witness to something once loud. Then came the maps, rolled up in a bin that once held motor oil. Dozens of them, state by state, highway routes marked in pencil, small red stars in corners of towns most people had never heard of, pickers' trails, each one a breadcrumb, each one leading to someone's attic, someone's barn, someone's forgotten treasure trove. Frank had never just traveled. He had tracked. It was a coffin, not new, not polished, worn, cracked along the base. A display model maybe, or maybe not. Inside was something wrapped in linen and sealed with wax. No one moved for a long time. They stared, unsure if they were meant to touch it or simply bear witness.
There's Popeye on High Wheel.
Yeah,
What's left of him.
Yeah.
His handlebars.
Oh, his pipe's gone?
He also would have had a pipe in his mouth.
They put him through the paces, so it's very difficult to find something that's in exceptional condition.
Boxes lined the wall with labels like Arkansas Barn Find and Ohio Gas Station, each one stuffed with artifacts, toy trucks, barbershop razors, pocket knives, each one with a tag, a date, a name. Frank hadn't just gathered junk, he had preserved moments, micro-histories tucked into cardboard and bubble wrap. Next to the stack was a journal, not typed, handwritten, more than 200 pages. Inside, notes on every piece he ever picked. When, where, from whom, what they said, what it meant to him. One page had a photo taped in, a boy on a mini bike. Underneath it read, "First ride, 1971, still running." The ink had smudged in places. It had been read, reread, possibly cried on. Then came the safe. Hidden behind a false wall, it took nearly 20 minutes to get open. Inside, ledgers, a bank book, and a velvet pouch. The team opened it and spilled the contents onto a workbench. Rings, medals, a sheriff's badge. One ring had the initials FF engraved next to the word survivor. There was also a locket. Inside it, 2 photos, one of the dogs, one of the girls. Neither labeled, neither explained. A neighbor wandered over, said he remembered Frank coming home late at night, headlights off, parking slow. Said he always wore gloves. Said the garage light stayed on until morning. Said no one ever went in with him. Ever. said the air would change when he passed by, like it held its breath, and now that someone had, they saw what he had been hiding.
All of his prized possession. It's like a museum in here. Okay, Jay, this is what they call a popsicle sign. It's mobile oil, it's got the gargoyle on it, it has the original base.
No shame, not secrets, but legacy. A story that didn't end on television. A life that stretched beyond the screen, beyond broadcast, into something sacred. It hit them then. This garage wasn't just a place Frank stored things. It was the place he went to live. Not escape, not hide, live. Here he wasn't a celebrity. He was the boy from Davenport, chasing relics and tuning engines. More discoveries followed. A section of the garage was stacked with vintage signs, gas stations, railroad crossings, movie posters from the 50s, curled and yellowing. Behind those, another door. This one smaller, built into the wall. It led to a crawl space, barely tall enough to stand in. But someone had clearly been there often. The dust was disturbed. Inside they found crates, sealed with rope, numbered, all matching a master list inside the journal. One crate was labeled with a haunting title, a reference to an episode that had never aired. They opened it. Inside were items never shown on American pickers. A vintage dollhouse burned on one side, a tin lunchbox filled with war pins, a cracked phonograph and a broken photo frame. Beneath them, a letter. Instead, they cataloged every piece, photographed each box, built a list. A local museum offered to take some. Others were held for auction, but not all. Some were sent to friends, fans, people whose names were written in the margins of his notes, people he had never met but never forgotten. That night, someone lit a candle and left it by the garage. The wind knocked it over. It burned for a few minutes, then went out. It seemed over until they moved the wall. The room behind the wall. By the second morning, the estate team thought they had seen everything. The motorcycles, the vintage signs, the labeled boxes. Each artifact whispered of a man who had spent his life collecting echoes. But something still hung in the air. A feeling, as if the garage itself had more to say, if only someone asked the right question. That question came when one of the team members noticed the bookshelf near the back corner. It was too clean, too perfectly squared. Everything else in the garage bore the mark of time. Dust, rust, fingerprints from decades past. But this shelf looked like it had been placed yesterday. Behind it, a note was taped to the wall. It was short, written in Frank's unmistakable hand, urging them to look behind the books and hinting that history doesn't always rest in plain sight. They moved the shelf, bracing for rodents or mold or nothing at all. What they found was a panel, plywood painted to blend in, fastened by 4 small screws that slid out without resistance. Behind the panel was a narrow hallway. It wasn't part of the official house plans. It had been carved out, stealthily, purposefully, just wide enough for one person to walk sideways. The floor was covered with a worn-out rug. The walls were lined with insulation. It smelled faintly of gasoline, paper, and something floral, something preserved.
Yeah. And there's stuff in them, but unfortunately, water got in them during the flood, and a lot of the things are ruined.
Yeah, moisture got in this one pretty bad.
Yeah.
At the end of the hallway, the team discovered a second room, 10 feet wide, 15 feet long, no windows, no vents. Just a single overhead bulb casting an amber glow across walls lined with pegboards, locked cabinets, and meticulously arranged shelves. At the center of the room stood a steel table, its surface etched with a map of the United States. Dozens of tiny flags pierced its surface. Blue, red, green, each color-coded, each accompanied by a yellowed index card. Some listed addresses, others referenced strange clues, like a whispering junkyard in Missouri, or a barn without doors somewhere in South Dakota, still unconfirmed. One warned against the location entirely, noting that it gave off a deeply unsettling feeling. Inside the first box, the one marked by its painful weight, they found VHS tapes, not commercial, homemade. Each marked in thick black marker with deeply personal references. A father's final ride, a spring haul from 1991, the day everything shifted. One tape had no proper label, just a strip of blue tape with a single, chilling word warning them to stop. They brought in a TV with a built-in player and pressed play. The tape flickered. Static filled the screen. Then Frank appeared, younger, smiling, but in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was standing in a forest, slowly turning the camera in a circle. There was no sound, just movement. Then a garage came into frame, clean, organized. Frank stood in the corner and stared into the lens. For a moment, barely a heartbeat, he cried. The tape was cut out. They didn't watch another. In the next box, the one marked by hesitation and unreadiness, they found photo albums. Not of antiques or road trips, but of people. Faces unknown to the team. Some laughing, some serious, some caught mid-motion. Each photo had first names scrawled on the back. Some included dates, others didn't. At the bottom of one album, taped inside the back cover, was a handwritten message that suggested anyone who had reached this point had uncovered the essence of the man who left it behind.
Over the years, I have picked a lot of strange places. I've met some very interesting people, but I've never met anyone that has stored stuff in caskets.
Anything gonna spring out of these coffins we aren't aware of?
There was a folder tucked beneath the albums. It was thick with papers, letters never sent, sketches of motorcycles that had never been built, and receipts from places the team couldn't trace. On the last page was a list, its title hinting at long-held secrets. Only one item had a checkmark beside it, a quiet confession that his journey hadn't truly ended. The last box bore a single word that hinted at unresolved questions. They opened it slowly, almost expecting something to fall out. But it was empty. Nothing inside, not even dust, just silence and space. Back in the crawl space, another team member shouted. They had found a second crawlway, this one narrower but deeper. Inside were more crates, each sealed with twine and wax. The labels were cryptic, offering warnings, partial truths, or signs of intentional concealment. They sliced one open, inside, a pocket watch with no hands, a broken compass, a baby shoe, a scorched postcard from Galveston, dated 1912. The writing had mostly faded, but one chilling message still clung to the paper. It spoke of a departure with no return.
Outside hasn't been outside in 25 years. Is it looking any better out here?
All right, here, sit on it. Sit on it. You got it?
Got it.
That thing's killer, dude.
Then came the cabinet locked with brass latches and coated in a layer of paint so thick it looked sculpted. It took them 20 minutes to pry it open. Inside, folders. Dozens of them. Each one chronicled a television episode that never made it to air. Some included photographs, others were marked with red ink warnings, indications that the stories were too intimate, had unsettled the crew, or remained unresolved to this day. One pitch stood out, an entry labeled as the 19th episode, ominously referred to as the Dollhouse. According to Frank's notes, he had once discovered a charred wooden dollhouse inside a collapsed barn in Ohio. Inside each miniature room, human teeth had been glued in place. Despite that, he brought it home. The network refused to get involved. As they sifted through the documents, patterns emerged. Frank hadn't just been collecting objects. He had been documenting the intangible, the haunting, the strange, the unexplainable, the things that didn't fit in neat boxes or cable schedules. These weren't just rejects. They were evidence. By dusk, the second room had been fully cataloged, but no one felt finished. They hadn't found answers. They had found more questions. The garage had been about memory. The second room? That was about the truth. Back near the entrance, someone discovered a hidden drawer beneath the steel map table. Inside was a single envelope, unsealed, with Frank's name written on the outside in someone else's handwriting. The letter inside wasn't long. It expressed a hope that, after a lifetime of searching for stories, Frank had finally discovered one that belonged to him. The room was found, but the story wasn't done yet. The legacy that refused to die. Days had passed since the team stepped into Frank Fritz's hidden world, but the feeling hadn't worn off. If anything, it had deepened. The discoveries weren't just physical, they were emotional, even spiritual. Everyone who had touched one of his boxes, flipped through a handwritten note, or stepped into that secret room found themselves changed. They had come expecting dust and clutter. Instead, they found the ghost of a man who had never truly left. Outside, the late autumn wind rattled the shutters. The sky stayed gray, as if mourning. But inside the house, something kept humming. In the main hallway, tucked behind a faded family portrait, they found a switch. Old brass painted over at least twice. Someone flipped it. A low buzz filled the air, followed by a click. Then the wall shifted, not dramatically, just enough to reveal a hidden stairway leading down into the basement.
Hey, good job.
That's pretty cool, man. When you hear that engine, that big twin, it comes alive.
Yeah.
If you've ridden a bike like this, you can appreciate that sound.
No one spoke as they descended. The steps were steep, the air dry and metallic. What waited below wasn't a cellar. It wasn't a storm shelter or a storage room. It was something else entirely. The space was vast, nearly half the size of the house itself. The floor was polished concrete. The walls were paneled in oak. Spotlights hung from the ceiling, illuminating rows of glass cases. It looked like a private museum, but not the kind you open to the public. This was personal, intimate, the kind of place built not to impress others, but to honor something sacred. Each case was labeled. Each one contained artifacts Frank had never shown anyone. Items too rare, too delicate, or too personal to be part of the show. Here, under glass, rested his silent trophies. In one case sat a World War I medic kit, fully intact. Next to it, a bloodied armband. A note explained that it had been picked up in Tennessee and still carried the scent of bravery. In another, a series of hand-carved figurines, miners, horses, wagons, crafted by a blind veteran in 1932. Each one held a story, carefully documented by Frank in flowing script on yellowing index cards. One case held nothing but broken toys, not restored, not valuable, just shattered reminders of childhoods long gone. Beneath them, a small sign conveyed a quiet truth, that sometimes things aren't meant to be fixed, only held on to. In the far corner, separated from the rest, stood a large wooden crate, taller than the others, wider too. The label indicated it was meant to be opened only after Frank was gone. The team hesitated. They exchanged uncertain glances, weighing the decision. But deep down, they knew. This was something Frank had prepared for them. They pried it open carefully. Inside, layers of canvas, wrapped tightly with twine. The smell hit first: leather, oil, cedar. They peeled the layers back to reveal something astonishing. A motorcycle. Not just any motorcycle. A one-of-a-kind custom build, unlike anything they had seen. The tank was painted matte black, and across it, in cursive gold, was a single word that seemed to carry the weight of everything Frank had left behind.
A fender with the frame.
I guess I had to dig out the motors.
Oh, you got the motors? Do you really?
It was almost like it's all just waiting there to fall together.
That's a nice start.
Yeah,
It's a real good start.
It really.
Beside the bike sat a leather-bound journal, sealed in a plastic sleeve. Its handwritten title hinted at a journey never taken. Inside were blueprints, calculations, sketches, and notes detailing the bike's creation. Every part had been hand-picked, restored, and tested, except for the final assembly. Frank had intended to finish it himself. At the very end, he left a final note, expressing that once completed, the machine was meant to ride on its own. Tucked beneath the bike, someone found a cassette recorder. When they pressed play, Frank's voice emerged, aged but steady. He spoke of how finding the recording meant someone had cared enough to keep searching. The bike, he explained, had never been intended for pavement. It was built to carry the weight of all the things he had left unsaid. His voice faltered slightly as he admitted there were truths he had never shared and places he had kept hidden. But now, for whoever was listening, all of it belonged to them. Not to possess, but to comprehend. As they moved through the rest of the basement, more cases revealed themselves. One contained letters, hundreds of them, sent to Frank over the years, fan mail, thank you notes, messages from children who had begun collecting because of his influence. Some addressed him with playful nicknames, celebrating his humor and personality, while others spoke simply and powerfully of how profoundly he had impacted their lives. He had kept everyone. In another case was a series of framed newspaper clippings. None were about him. All were about others. Small-town collectors, people who had restored old barns, families that had preserved historical objects. Frank had followed up with some of them. He had visited others. In one note, he described how a family had rescued a carousel horse and how he had driven 3 hours just to see it, an experience he considered more than worth the effort.
You letting us look at it and buy a few pieces, because we understand the importance of
it.
it.
It can get out from inside this building. It's just sitting in here collecting dust, nobody's seeing it.
Near the basement's exit sat a wooden desk. Covered in dust, yes, but still organized. On top lay a stack of blank postcards and a Polaroid camera. Next to it, an open envelope containing photos of his earliest pics. The very first signs, gas pumps, bikes. He had planned to send each photo to someone. Each one had a sticky note with a name and address, but none had been mailed. One team member picked up a photo of an old Sinclair gas sign dated 1990. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, was a note recalling how Frank had found it with his father, who dismissed it as junk, though Frank had instinctively known it held value. In the corner drawer of the desk, they found an obituary. It wasn't Frank's. It belonged to a woman named Lillian Joyce, someone unknown to the team. The obituary had been clipped, underlined, and annotated. Frank had circled her birth date and left a message explaining that she had given him his first bike, a moment he vowed never to forget. Alongside it, a pressed flower rested, dry but still intact. In the final cabinet, hidden behind a dusty canvas, they found one last surprise, a painting, unfinished, acrylic on canvas. It showed Frank riding a bike through a cornfield, head tilted back, eyes closed. There were no details on the face, just motion, just freedom. Beneath the canvas, a scrawled note captured the essence of the image, an attempt to express how that moment had felt. They left the basement quietly. No loud voices, no hurried packing, just stillness, reverence. Outside, dusk was settling in, and the first star blinked through the clouds. The house behind them remained, but it no longer felt like just a house. It was something more, a monument built not from marble, but from effort, heart, and time. What if Frank didn't die from a stroke, but because of what he found in that house? Drop your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.